The Hidden Secret in the Conversation with the Stars by Imam Fakhr al-Din al-Razi. Translation by Muhammad Al-Amrani. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. All praise is due to God, who encompasses all things in knowledge and penetrates everything in wisdom. And blessings and peace be upon the Prophet of Mercy and the intercessor of the nation, Muhammad, and upon his pure family. To proceed. This is a treatise that gathers within it the principles of the ladder of talismans and enchantments, and the invocations of the stars, along with a disavowal of all that opposes the religion and the sound certainty, relying entirely upon the benevolence of the Most Gracious. Before delving into the intended subject, it is necessary to present introductory chapters regarding the virtue of the learned, rational soul and its departure from the darkness of nature that have shrouded dead souls and veiled them from the living world by the adornments of perishing nature. This is for him who does not conceive of realities and does not concern himself with knowledge. Socrates said within the contents of the wisdom, "The living soul is its light, which is from the parchments, intellectual archetypes, while the weakness thereof is verily a dead soul, dark, corrupt, possessing neither movement nor life. And it does not behoove that the living soul be deposited anywhere save in a living body, holding itself pure from dead skins. For indeed, souls are strengthened by wisdom, just as bodies are strengthened by food and drink. And wisdom washes the souls from the filth of nature, just as water washes clothes. And the soul, when it recognizes wisdom, yearns and longs for the living world, and turns away from the lusts of dead nature and the lowly souls that are pleased with the captivity of nature. And its state, which is attached to its people, is as Hippocrates said, 'He is not wise who knows the path and deviates from it. Rather, ignorance is merely the garment of he who knows not himself. And the death of the ignorant one is better than his life, because the vices of nature, if they attach themselves to souls and bind them in their state, they die a death after which there is no death. But as long as they remain bound, do not hope for their safety or their liberation. For indeed, evil is a bond on the necks of the tyrants, and a sickness in the spirits. So death is a repose for them. And Socrates said, 'He does not survive who eats and drinks, and prefers the lusts, and deadens the living soul with gluttony for that which does not endure, causing his joy to be in the suffocation within the filth of the world of nature, turning over in its states because of its corruption. Nor does he survive who is captivated by its bonds. Indeed, the living is only he who knows the passing of what has passed of pleasures, and is certain that the future is like the past in its lack of permanence and stability. And know that the natural world is an abode of evil and confusion. Its goodness is vanishings, and its duration is a term of days. Thus man never detaches himself from regret over the past, nor from fear of what is to come. So imagine the state of one who is indulged in the pleasures of the body, sinking into the filth of his desires, obtaining in the moment of bringing forth pleasure that which is greater than the pleasure of experiencing it. And if the semen is retained, it becomes a ruin for the body and a destruction. Then consider, when the state of eating takes over him, the filled one is dispirited and finds repugnant what he had found delicious but a moment before, his appetite turning to aversion. Indeed, habit is a second nature, and whosoever finds excellence in his sight, and one for whom the hand of time has not extended with drying oppression, this is he who combines that which kings attain, and that which the people of honour attain, of the goods of this world and its desires. It is viewed as small in the eyes of the sages, and were kings to understand the deficiency of their pleasure and its scarceness compared to the pleasure by which the scholars are favoured, they would consider themselves wretched and destitute. Socrates said, "If a human rises from the lowest position to the middle position, he stands there without change. He sees the highest position, so he imagines that he has ascended or risen to the height. But as for him who senses it, he has indeed despised what he is in." And how can it be permissible to name that which kings possess as pleasure, when it is but food and drink, by which hunger and thirst are stilled, and clothing to cover the heat and cold, and intercourse which the beasts take refuge in, due to lust? These are matters shared between man and the beasts. And as for the seeking of sovereignty and grandeur, and the capacity for fighting and combat, indeed the beasts approach one another with horns, teeth, claws, and hooves. Kings confront one another with their souls and risk them, causing pain to one another. So in what thing are they superior to the beasts? And how can the rational man envy them, given their sharing with the beasts in these matters? And God knows best. Chapter 2. Regarding the virtues of this science, know that the masters of this science have combined the pleasure of the most noble of sciences and the most noble types of power. As for the pleasure of knowledge, indeed, this science causes you to stand upon the secrets of the world, both the high and the low, and makes you such that you witness the spiritual entities and mingle with them, and they with you, to the extent that not one of their likes is hidden from you. And as for the pleasure of power, they are able to do all that is intended, such that the master thereof has power over the curing of difficult illnesses which doctors are incapable of, such as leprosy and acute passion. This is because they seek aid from the spiritual forces, and the doctors seek aid from the physical bodies. And the spiritual is stronger than the physical inevitably. And from it is that the master of this science has power over the oppression of the adversary without the practice of wars or incitement to killing. It is even recounted that Aristotle the sage was sitting before the imams of the sages, and between him and Bidagus the Turk there occurred a dispute in one of the regions of Babylon. Bidagus was of the temperament of Mars and departed. So Aristotle said, "How shall he persist, and when shall he return from his arrogance?" Until Mars moved away. When Aristotle heard this, he worked a deed upon Mars, the burning one, and used the spirituality of Mars against him. So Bidagus perished at the hand of a swoon, and creation was relieved of his evil without armies or the ruin of souls. It is even recounted that Abu Mashar al-Balkhi, may God have mercy upon him, was in the lands of India, a king of the rational ones, knowing the secrets of the stars and employing Mars. An adversary appeared to him, and he did not turn towards him until he was near his city. So he gathered Mars and shaped the hand, the talismanic figure, yet the king was occupied with merriment with his boon companions. Wait, for that which his followers saw was the severed head of the king thrown into their gathering. They looked at it with the terror of souls in the form of the king, with something of the head cut off. Immediately his companions saw that thing, the dread, and they fled from his presence and dispersed. But the king remained still, looking at them and laughing, and he didn't move until an hour had passed. Then he ordered that they be brought back. When they came fearful, the king said to mankind, "Indeed, this is the head of the king who intended us." They stood and examined it, and behold, it was his head. And it was the fruit of our knowledge which we are occupied with. And you attributed madness to us due to seclusion and occupation with this science of madness. So I pardon you. Then they kissed the ground in apology, complaining. Then the king took that vessel and said, do you know what is the cause of this being only 3 days? That implies the ascendant which began this matter was Mars in the trine of the sun. Then the king remained investigating that matter and the knowledge of the cause of the killing of that Brahmin. They occupied themselves with the invocation of Mars, so for 4 months a single month did not pass before a thunderbolt fell from the sky upon the heads of the people and burned them all. And among the virtues is that the master of this science possesses the power to create spirits and bodies through the events that will occur, such that it is possible to guard against harm. And Thabit ibn Qurra recounted, he said that spirits of my wind were connected to me, and it was the habit of each of them that if he saw within some of the distant horizons a concord regarding my affairs or my child, the supporter, he would assume a form for me or deny me. Then he would become angry with an anger that foretold of killing. Then I would serve. While I was in my bed, my spiritual companion came to me and woke me from my sleep and ordered me to flee. So I went out from the house and entered the house of some of the loved ones. When it was the time of dawn, the messenger of the supporter came seeking me, but he did not find me, in my opinion, location, nor in the house of the neighbours. When morning came, he contacted the news spies regarding the command of the supporter, and the messenger of the supporter sought my son Sinan, and my son was in the bed and did not see him. Then the news reached me that he was incapable of finding us, and turned away from the search. And the torches that were with them were extinguished, and they struggled to light them but were unable. And my son was mixing with them in the house, and they did not know him. Rather, they thought he was a man among them. He said, my spiritual companion came to me, and I said, why do you not make the likeness of my son appear? They said, because he is now outside the counterpart of Mars, so we have no security for you regarding the likeness of your son Sinan, for indeed the sphere of Solomon the Magian appears to me tampering with Cancer. And Mars enforced his decree after 2 hours. And after 2 hours one day I suffered from some of my brothers, for whosoever Mars overpowers perishes, and his destruction is worse than death. Then I saw that my spiritual companion remained angry with me, and I punished him with a punishment wherein I feared destruction. So I apologized to him and informed him that I had repented from the likes of these matters in which I sought the aid of others beside him. And I did not cease pleasing him with offerings and invocation until he withheld his corruption from me. Then he appeared to me, so I asked him to make the heart of the supporter favourable to me, and Saturn, the cold planet of nature, slow in motion, departed. And my affair was delayed, so I sought aid from Venus, so the purpose was achieved, and I was saved from it, effecting the rescue of the oppressed from the hands of the oppressors, and from it is the power over the ruining of distant things and the disposal thereof. Thabit ibn Qurra said, in the mention of the Al-Amrani, Haranian, referring to the Sabian sect, he mentions some words that strengthen the sight to where whatever is far is counted as near before him. He manages it, controls it. Some of the people of the gospel spoke to me, so every wish of the desires of all the wandering and fixed planets was in their proper placements. And there was a light rising in the dense bodies, and he used to see what we see, so we tested him. I and Kusta ibn Luqa al-Baqi were present, and we were writing something and writing a book. And he was reading against us and knowing every line from the book and another. And thus we would take the paper and write, and between us was a wall and a narrow opening, so he would take it, read it, via the paper, through the wall, and copy what we wrote entirely as if he were looking at it. We write, and we asked him, if a mishap occurred to you, would he inform you of evil regarding you? And a boy was born to him and lived for a third of the parts of the bull, Taurus. So we investigated regarding it, and he said, nay, the separation, al-fasl, requires 3 conditions for occupation with this science and the margins thereof. One of them is that whoever works a thing from these works, then your partnership in it does not benefit you, and that does not belong to you, because the spirits look upon our hearts. So in this science, he who does not trust in anyone, and does not believe in his power over the command, is of no benefit. And he who thinks ill of ignorance and incapacity regarding this kind of science, nothing of it will benefit him. And he does not care about his affair, and his need is not fulfilled. For thus are the spirits, they do not respond to one who does not trust in them. And the second of them is, approach the spirits repeatedly, and one finds benefit. For it is incumbent that he not cease, and that he not become weary of the repetition of the work. For he who knows the command of wars and fighting regarding the small thing, it does not seem great to him what he encounters in the seeking of this science, which does not increase a thing of the sciences. And the equitable one is he who knows it and falls short in it, and does not strive with all diligence until he reaches it. And he who realizes a thing from it, not a little, but much, is easy for him. Istolenus, Ostanes, Aristotle, said, I was occupied with this science morning and evening, and I found the increase of its praise there. And if the increase returned to my head, I had thought ill of it. And if the duration was long, and the days followed in succession, and perhaps something occurred wherein I thought that I was cut off from the objective until I reached it. And it is necessary that the path of the seeker of this science be the path of the lover when he is forgiving with his beloved. For if I sit seeking it, he does not leave it at all. And if I am sincere in the request, I find it. And if it was after a time, and every objective is attained, even if it be high in the sky, and whoever returns from his need, he is not a seeker. And also it is for the rational man that he not compare this noble state with the rest of matters. So let him believe that his transaction is with spirits, just as a transaction with the lowly humble. If he wants him to make him hospitable, he gives him of his soul, self, and what is from his breath, and keeps away the filth by the language. Thus indeed here, and whoever wants to be in the service of a great king, then let him burden himself for his purpose, and strive in the service and righteousness and following the rules, even if he wins his objective with one of his own genus. So how is it if he is in need of that which is not of his genus? And the third of them, that the people, whosoever thinks that man does not attain desires save by nature, and this is false, because diligence may lead to what the ascendant does not indicate. Do you not see that the sphere may require coolness? Then the human warms it by the coat and the cloak and the rubbing. And it may require heat, and the human cools by the air-conditioner, cooling device, fan, and the water, and the spreading of leaves, and the disagreement of foods. Wait, I used to be one of the seekers of this science, and I did not wish for a child by it, but I sought it seeking independence and strangeness, extraordinary things. And I remained many days until I saw contrary companions, until the near ones were distinguished for me. And with this I stopped the works entirely until I realized the hereafter is my purpose. And I attained in it all that I wrote, assuming and reaching it rather, some of it. The sages agreed upon 3 conditions for this science. The sage said, Hermes commanded the spirits that they conceal these secrets, for the planets belong to nature. When they know this science, they use it in the lusts or for the death of souls, for the sake of envy and arrogance. And the emergence of the high world and the standing of mankind upon its secrets are fearsome for he who knows them from the limit of humanity to the limit of divinity. So it is behooving on the earth that whosoever knows the spiritual world by its names and its essences and its modes, let him distance from his hand the instruments of injustice and corruption. So Hermes prohibited it, revealed it only to the worthy. And when the scholars agreed upon that, most of 4 elements gathered. The 4th, emptying the element of the intellect from the work. The 5th, the sages agreed upon the practice of these works in the night rather than the day. And that is because the sun is a subjugating sultan, so its authority dominates all the spirits and no thing is strong against it in action. And because all the psychic forces settle and yearn in this chapter at night, and the senses are occupied with the sense things in the day, useless in the night. So the action in the night is stronger, and Hermes said in the hidden book regarding the secret of the 2 luminaries, sun and moon. The best of what the worker prepares is that which is hidden from the eyes of mankind and the rising of the sun. That is because the eyes of mankind draw down the spiritualities of the spirits of the luminaries. They serve them. And the rising of the sun and its light invalidate the luminaries and invalidate their spirituality entirely. He said, work the works of love, enmity, the binding of lust, the tying of poisons, and the entering upon them by night. And as for the talismans in the crafts, and the invocations, and the treatment of the spiritualities, and the mixing of poisons, and their dissolution, if you wish by night, and if you wish by day. And guard in that from the flashing eyes and the evil gazes, for indeed they corrupt the spiritualities of the high world, the small and the great, and strip them of their limits, definitions. And it is obligatory that you know that there is nothing of things whose effect is cut off by the eye, like the corruption of the effect of the eye in the corruption of these 3 things, Mars, the craft, and the invocation of spirituality. And its masters agreed that the master of this science, all that was of his actions for the good, was more of his actions than of the evil. That is because the nature of the high world is built upon the good. So whosoever occupies himself with the good, the universal nature aids him. And from its conditions is that he should not eat anything of animals, and should restrict himself to bread and salt and the plants of the earth. And specifically that he not use the spiritualities save in the inciting matters, but rather in the great matters according to what befits every spirit. And the 9th of them, that he not face them, the spirits, time after time, like the headache, nor by insistence, for indeed that destroys the soul. And its 10th, that he be knowing of the chapters of the stars and their benefits. And the 11th, that he be tough, strong of heart, patient, firm of heart, distant from filth and dirt and filthiness. And the 12th, that he be accepting of the action of his soul, pertaining to the spiritual matters that I mean by the high force to live from the affairs of the spiritualities. I longed for it, and my skin shivered from it. Stand a little. So whoever moves except to seek the bodily pleasures, then he doesn't attain this science. Chapter 1. Of the first treatise from the Book of the Hidden Secret regarding the establishment of the universal principles for this science and the consideration of its essence and its active causes, and the states of whoever practices it, and the similar sciences, and the distinction between it and between the separation, al-fazl, concerning the talisman. Regarding the talisman and the verification of speech concerning it upon the universal mode. The talisman is an expression for the knowledge of the active celestial forces upon the passive elemental forces to prepare the empowerment from the manifestation of that which contradicts the norm, or prevents it by its own essence. And the verification of speech in it calls for two stations. One of them, the proof of the celestial forces as a cause for the terrestrial accidents, and its decision is that the accidents in this elemental world inevitably have causes. So their causes are either to be originated in time or eternal. If they were originated, they would require other causes, and this necessitates an infinite regress, and that is impossible. Because the originated cause is an effect, inevitably, and that it be existent with the cause is a redundancy. For if the effect exists in the existence of every originated cause, then the first is like the outcome of those things, not the cause, and the causes which have no end revert to a single unit. But that is impossible, because the sum is possible, contingent, and originated, and the number of every one of its parts is an effect, and every possible thing has a cause different from it. So then that sum is impoverished for a sum, and every one of the parts of the effect is to a cause, and the thing distinct from the sum of possibilities, and for every one of the parts of that sum is not possible undoubtedly. So then the termination of all possibilities and originated things is proven to a cause that is eternal and necessary of existence. Thus we say, in that eternal being, it must be that every perfection from his effectiveness is realized in eternity. And it is not like that in this division, the world of change. The saying of he who says that he only created this originated thing in this time because he created it in another time, because his creation was dependent upon the presence of a specific time or a destined matter. So then, based on all these sayings, it is correct that all that is established in this effectiveness was realized in eternity. Thus it becomes necessary that the effect and the obligation of the arrangement be upon, conditioned by, the eternity. Because if the effect were not eternal, and he necessitated it, then the approximation upon it would be impossible. Or if the arrangement upon it were possible, then the arrangement also would be affirmed. Let us assume then a source for that, like the effect in the act. Because everything that is possible implies necessity, and occurrence is impossible. So the distinction of the time in which the effect occurred from its source, or the effect in act from the time which did not become like that, either depends upon the joining of a restriction to it, or it does not depend. So if it depended upon a restriction that did not obtain before the joining of this restriction to the effectiveness, and we have assumed all of that as eternal, this is a contradiction. And if it did not depend, then the possible would outweigh the impossible without an outweighing factor, muraji, and this is impossible. And similarly, the door of drawing evidence by the possibility upon the outweigher, God. And regarding what we said, that everything that is indispensable in the effectiveness, if it were realized, then that cause continued eternal, and it was obligatory that the effect not become originated. Just as we assumed it effective in eternity, this is a contradiction. So then, change has occurred to some of what is indispensable in the effectiveness. So if the occurrence of that restriction was not a cause, it is impossible. And considering the possible not regarding its effect, this is a contradiction. And if it was an originated cause, we shift the discussion to the modality of its occurrence, and the infinite regress returns, or falling into the causes by their being existent all at once, and that is invalid, And the second is that the infinite regress be one dependent upon another, going back to infinity, not to a beginning. And the first of that is the evident, for indeed, when all the divisions are invalid, except for this division, it becomes specific. And it leads to the necessity that it be said. That eternal effective force for the self implies also that every originated thing is preceded by an originated thing, another, until it ends at the expiration of the preceding condition for the emanation of the delayed effect. And by this path, the first principle becomes a beginning for the originated changes. They said, and this is an example in the natural motions and in the motions of the wills, intentions. As for the natural motions, like the clod of earth thrown to the above, it returns by its weight to the earth. So the cause for that motion, from the beginning of the distance to its end, is that weight. Indeed, the transfer of the body from the second locus to the third locus is necessary, because the previous motion arrived at the second locus. So the occurrence of the first part of the motion and its expiration became a condition of possibility for that weight to become a cause for the movement of the body from the second locus to the third locus. And thus is the saying regarding all the parts which are in the voluntary motions. So whoever wants to go to visit a friend, then that will is the effective cause in the movement of the body from that place to the place of that friend. But the effect of that will in bringing about the first step and its expiration. And on this path, indeed, every preceding step is a condition for the possibility of the effect of that will in the attainment of the subsequent step. Based on this arrangement, to the end of the distance, it is proven that the mediation of emotion, eternal and everlasting, is inevitable between the first principle and these occurrences. And this everlasting motion is prevented from being straight, linear. Otherwise, it would imply the existence of dimensions distinct from us which are infinite, and this is impossible. So then it must be of a body moving in circularity, and it is the celestial sphere. So it is proven that the motions of the spheres are the proximate principles for the originated occurrences in this world. And because the celestial sphere is a simple body, and the ratio obtaining between the similar parts is similar, and similar things in the fullness of quiddity cannot be a cause for different matters, it became necessary that there be different bodies in the bodies of the spheres, the planets and stars, and that the shapes of the bodies be different, so that their ratios and forms differ, until the formation of those shapes becomes their principles for the occurrence of occurrences in the world of generation and corruption, the sublunary world. They are the conjunctions of the stars. Then the holders of this doctrine, and they are the philosophers and the Sabians, said, by the configuration of these stars they occupied themselves with their worship, and took for every one of them a temple and a specific idol. And they occupied themselves with their service, claiming that the active principle is not sufficient for the occurrence of the effect, but the presence of the recipient is inevitable. And for its presence, sufficiency is not enough. Rather, conditions must be met and impediments removed. So whatever occurs of a strange formation in the matter of the lower world, then the movement of the lower matter is prepared to accept that form from the Motharat influences. For the dimension of that configuration, astrological aspect, is for a time. Not because the being is withheld by impediments, and the other is for the expiry of some of the condition. But the divinely bestowed things regarding knowledge linked to nature, that formation, and in a specific time, and limiting upon the matters considered in the being of the lower matter, excepting for that effect. So we are enabled to prepare the matter for the acceptance of that effect, and the removal of impediments from it, and the attainment of the readying causes, until that emanation, flux, is completed for the matter. Whenever the passive is ready to meet the active, the completion becomes actual. So the master of the talismans is he who knows the active high forces and the simple and compound natures thereof, and knows what corresponds to each of them of the passive low forces, and knows the readying causes for their dimensions and the impediments according to the capacity of human energy, and by which man is enabled to bring forth that which breaks the norm, miracles, magic, and from repelling what falls upon it by approximating the passive to the active. And this is the saying of Ptolemy concerning the science of the stars, possible, and from it is this saying the philosophy, and the definition of the talisman is attached to its verification. Chapter 2. Regarding the knowledge of the natures of the stars, their mixtures, and what does not befit human capacity, and it indicates it by several facets. One of them, that there is no way to the proof of the stars save by the mediation of the visual faculty, and doubt regarding the finishing of its perception of the small due to distance is deficient. For indeed the smallest of the stars in the constellation of the seventh in the sphere of the eighth is that whose area is equivalent to the size of the earth several times, and that the sphere of the earth is greater than the sphere of Mercury, and thus 1,000 times. So were it not that the star of the greatest sphere, the Sun, Jupiter, etc., is greater than the amount of Mercury or smaller than it? And this, based on the estimation, there is no doubt that the perception does not realize its amount as it is, or that there are in the heavens many spheres active. And if we knew the existence of them as a virtue, from that it strikes their natures. And for this the master of the lookouts, astronomical observations, transmitted regarding Zawayai, the master of mankind, that in the sphere of the stars, monitored stars are many which are not observed. As for the excessive smallness thereof, or their concealment, as for this world, we do not say their smallness is partitioned, implying the weakness of the effect. Do you not see that the greatness of the smallest of the simple bodies, along with that its effects are strong? Nay, the head and the tail, the lunar nodes, are 2 points, and they have strong effects considered by the judicial astrologers. The second of them, the stars which are not monitored, also with their secrets, and what is verified of that, indeed what is proven by the indication, is that the galaxy, Milky Way, is not very small stars gathered in the sphere of the fixed stars upon this specific azimuth. So it is apparent that the standing upon their natures is impossible. And the third of them, that these monitored stars, in order to obtain the complete standing upon their natures, because the sayings of the wise men concerning what we have said of the summary regarding the natures of the fixed stars, considering they claimed they warred with some of the fixed stars which are in the constellation of the first and the second. As for the rest, they did not agree upon that they knew their natures as simple elements. And fourth of them, that on the assumption that the knowledge of the natures of these stars is encompassing, but we do not possess the standing upon their natures, considering their mixtures, save by the way of approximation, far from verification. Then we know that the source of the occurrence of accidents in this world is not their simple natures, otherwise these effects would not differ. Rather, it only results from their mixtures, and those mixtures are limitless, wherefore there is no way to comprehend them fully. And the fifth of them is that the instruments of observation rarely determine with precision the seconds and the thirds of a degree, or similar measurements of the celestial sphere, to say nothing of the disagreement regarding the disparity of the observation. and a single second of the celestial sphere is equivalent to miles upon the earth, or even more. How then is it possible to arrive at the intended objective amidst this vast disparity? And the sixth of them is that the forms of those mixtures, we do not know with certainty the traces of the mixtures that came to pass before this time in the events of this time. And for this reason the effects differ in the conditions of individuals. As for that, it is because the ascendants of nativities were different in the origin, so those ascendants became influential in the difference of the times. Thus it is established by these aspects that the complete standing upon the active high forces is impossible. As for the lower substances, a complete grasp of their natures is impossible, for full receptivity does not obtain save with specific conditions of quality, quantity, position, and the rest of the categories. And the lower substances are not fixed upon a single state. Rather, they are in eternal transformation and alteration. And that was evident to the senses, for it has appeared from what we have mentioned that the complete standing upon the states of the active celestial forces and the passive earthly forces is unattainable for a human being. And were that attained by anyone, it would be necessary for that person to be knowing of the details of what is, and what was, and what will be, and that he be capable of originating wondrous matters. Thus, in this investigation, that which satisfies the intellect regarding the possibility of this art is that we say, that which cannot be grasped in its entirety must not be abandoned in its entirety. Even if human intellects fall short of encompassing the high active forces and the low passive forces, yet they are enabled to gain insight into some of their states. As for that which is acquired of the truthful experiences and the truthful power, that is of a grand measure. And even if it is small in relation to what exists in reality, yet it is great in relation to human capacity and power. And the absence of proof does not necessitate the absence of knowledge, because the demonstration is more specific than knowledge. And the absence of the more specific does not necessitate the absence of the more general. Thus, the knowledge of the natures of the instruments and the strings results in a skill, yet the reason proofs thereof are not present. And this art is more worthy of solicitude than the art of medicine, for there is no sharing in the absence of logical proofs. The distinctiveness of this art from medicine is that, regarding medicine, it is hoped that it might benefit, yet it is possible that it might harm. As for this art, it is established that the solicitude is obligatory, for if the indication which contradicts the astrological indications is said to be true, then it benefits, and if it were false, there is no benefit, yet there is no need for it. So we say regarding this classification, the benefit returns in all things. For indeed, this human being, his measure is the satiety, yet there is a need for him to eat, and that he possesses a measure regarding hunger, so there is a benefit in eating, and this does not imply that the human should not engage in eating and drinking without the pains, and likewise regarding the desire for pleasures. And were it that this human being was happy in the obediences worship, and were he to be wretched in the obediences fundamentally, if the premise of reward were false, then there would be no benefit in them, so it would be necessary that he not occupy himself with acts of worship. So our answer to them regarding this classification is our answer here. Chapter 3. Regarding the path by which the conditions of the spheres are known. The famous answer is that it is experience solely. Yet this saying is false in my estimation, because experience inevitably requires repetition. And here are matters that do not recur, save in a duration of chasing the ages, such as the exactitude of the conjunctions of the stars, and the conjunctions of the thousands, and the shifting of the ascendant of the world in every year. a single degree, and similar to that by which the planetary sphere of Saturn is interpreted. Nay, it is true that the path thereto is proximity in hatred. The modes of inspiration in the remainder, as is the case in the forms of degrees, the thousands, and the conjunctions, nay, even the unknown forms and harmonious arrangements, and the incantations which the masters of talismans have commanded. There is no way to any of this save through inspiration. And a certain Sakawi claimed that many matters appeared to him during sleep within the temples of the stars, after the offering of obediences and conjunctions. And it is recounted regarding Zawai, the master of mankind, that he beheld in the world of the two poles wondrous matters, and in the world of the centre the like thereof. And he claimed that he only came to know them from the sun, and he had a distinct nature for it. He said, and that is because Zawai stood praising the sun for 42 days, night and day, and he extolled it with praises that no one had ever offered before. And he sought to draw himself near to the sun until he saw in his sleep on the morning of the sun one saying, "Indeed, the indication is sufficiency for you and for others, so do not torment yourself." And know that the doctrine of these Sabians is that these stars are living, rational, articulate entities capable of action. They agreed that for every single one of the spirits of these stars, a manifestation has appeared to man in a specific time, inspiring him with these inscriptions and incantations, which are the names of those spirits and the names of their helpers. And all their books are comprised of this saying. Furthermore, it is not far-fetched to say that these incantations, which are unknown to us, are in truth known words, but they are mentioned in languages that have in our time become abandoned. For verily, most of these sciences are absent from the majority. And there were two who were perfect in ancient times, who performed wondrous deeds in the world. But as for now, those languages have become extinct. Thus, inevitably, these words have remained ambiguous. Yet we affirm decisively that, on the assumption that these words comprise praise for these stars and a mention of their properties and effects, it is not improbable that man's mentioning of the attributes of these stars in known words may stand in their stead and yield their benefit. And this is what I hold in this chapter. Chapter 4, regarding magic, founded upon the purification of the soul and the suspension of the imagination. Regarding the immersion into the intended objective, it has become evident that the purification of the soul and the suspending of the imagination have a tremendous effect, indicated by several facets. One of them is that the archer, when he desires to loose an arrow towards a specific target, cannot achieve this unless he gathers his heart and directs the strike. And he who wishes to scrutinize a thing must burden himself with gathering his gaze and directing it entirely toward that locus. For were he to remain occupied with looking at another thing, the scrutinizing gaze toward that locus would be impossible for him. The second of them is that the mountain rams, when they desire to descend from towering peaks, rely upon the mountain which may have a height of 2 or 3 miles. Then they contemplate safety with a true contemplation, and then they cast themselves from the summit of the mountain, landing upon their horns safe and sound. Were it not for their conceptualization of safety, their limbs would be torn asunder, or they would perish. Thus is the human being. When he prefers a goal, it is inevitable that his mind be found entirely directed toward it, and that his mind not be occupied entirely with anything other than it. The third of them is that reason and tradition concur that the evil eye is a reality, and this is due to nothing other than a psychic influence. The fourth of them is that a body upon which a human is able to walk, if it be placed upon the ground, he is able to walk upon it. Yet were it placed like a bridge over an abyss, his imagination would restrain him from that which implies the impossibility of walking upon it at all, due to the imagining of the fall. When this imagination is strengthened, it brings it forth into action. The fifth of them is that the cold faculties in the muscles fit for both action and inaction, and neither of these two poles shall prevail over the other save by a determinant. And what is this determinant, if not the conception of the act as beautiful and delightful, or the conception of it as ugly and painful? Thus it is these very conceptions that serve as the causes for the manifestation of effects. What unlikelihood, then, is there in the principles of these effects residing within the souls themselves? The witness to this truth is both experience and analogy, for it is witness that conceptions may serve as the origins for the arising of qualities within physical bodies. Indeed, intense anger may engender a fervent heat. It is related that a certain king was afflicted with palsy, and the physicians were rendered impotent in their attempts to cure him, until one among them, possessed of keen insight, set upon him unawares with egregious insults. The king's wrath waxed fierce, and he leapt from his bed to strike the reviler, and by the searing heat of that anger the humours were expelled, and that potent affliction, and what preceded it, vanished. Furthermore, they are unanimous in forbidding one suffering from nosebleeds to gaze upon red objects, or the epileptic from looking upon things of intense brilliance or rotation. This is naught but because the soul has been created compliant to illusions. Among these accounts is that which was related by the chief master, Abu Ali ibn Abdullah ibn Sina al-Bukhari, may God exalt his station, in the Book of Animals, citing the first teacher, Aristotle, that should a hen imitate a rooster in its crowing and combat, a spur will grow upon its leg, resembling the spur that is established upon the leg of the rooster. He then observed, "This demonstrates that physical states are subservient to the states of the soul." A ninth, it is mentioned in the Book of Problems that he was asked, "Why is the divergence among individual domestic animals greater than the divergence among wild animals?" He replied that the imaginings and thoughts of man exceed those of all other animals, and that physical forms alter in accordance with the alterations of conceptions. Thus it follows inevitably that the variation found among domestic animal individuals, whose perception of diverse matters is more acute than that of wild animals, is far greater. And tenth, we perceive the variation in the human form in accordance with the variation of the soul's attributes, for one's countenance and voice, when overcome by anger, differ from their state when free of anger. The same may be said regarding desire, joy, and sorrow. By this it is established that the form of man, his voice and his movements vary with the variation of his soul's conceptions. Thus, through the sum of what we have recounted, it is established that the conceptions of the soul possess potent influences over physical effects. We perceive these influences to differ in strength and weakness. Just as we witness a person in whom this manner of influence is feeble, we are not bereft of those in whom this influence is so potent that it achieves what others are incapable of. Having thus elucidated these two premises, let us now return to our sought objective. We say, therefore, the power of the soul to bring forth an act that breaks the bounds of custom may arise through an acquired path. As for the theoretical aspect, the affirmation thereof rests upon a premise, namely, is the soul a substance subsisting in itself, Or is it merely an expression of this specific physical temperament? If we affirm the former, it is not impossible that the human soul differs in its very essence from other souls, and further that by virtue of being this specific essence, it is characterized by a power not present in other souls. Thus, inevitably, the soul becomes capable of deeds which others are rendered incapable of performing, provided we maintain that human souls differ in their very quiddity, which is indeed the truth. However, even if we were to say that they are united in quiddity, there is no doubt that they differ due to the bodily instruments and the entanglement of psychic accidents. Thus, it is not improbable that certain souls are distinguished by a specific temperament which serves as an instrument for actions that break the norms of habit, or due to specific psychic accidents inherent to them by their very strength. When the light of the world of the unseen manifests to such souls, they become empowered, through that strength, over that which governs the remaining souls. This is the intended meaning of the saying of the Imam of Imams, God's vicegerent over his creation, the commander of the faithful and the Imam of the God-conscious, Ali ibn Abi Talib, peace be upon him. By God, I did not uproot the gate of Khaybar with mere bodily strength, but rather with a divine power. As for what we have stated, that the soul is not merely the specific temperament, there is no doubt that temperaments differ. Thus, the existence of a wondrous temperament, empowering its possessor to achieve what others cannot, is not far-fetched, proven by that which we have established, wherein there is no improbability. As for magic, or the wondrous deed, its occurrence is not known except through witnessing. Thus, if this force of the soul is upon this specific disposition, acts involving the breaking of norms occur. We say that the acquisition of this state is built upon two conditions, the innate state and the acquired state. This relies upon the consideration of the state of the ascendant. For regarding every individual, either his ascendant indicates that these works proceed from him, some being devoid of aid, and some aided, or it does not. Since the degrees of assistance are distinct and not disciplined by a specific limit, there is necessarily a variation in ranks in this chapter. Just as the consideration of the three divisions is necessary, so too is the consideration of the ascendant, the culmination, and the auspicious placement. For this reason, we see a person exhausting himself to obtain the laws of this science, observing its conditions, yet he does not err save for a rarity, obtaining his goal only after a little while, or perhaps obtaining nothing at all. Ignorance of those who profess this craft without understanding it implies the invalidity of this craft itself. This is false, as we have mentioned. One must observe regarding these views. Are they specifically upon the correct formula? For that reason, if the single rag is cut by two people, one reaches the utmost end in a short time, while the other does not reach the end even with prolonged duration, despite the toil. Thus, it is the same in this craft. How can the impossible be fitting in this craft, which is the most noble of crafts? Abu Bakr ibn Wahshiyah stated in the Book of Magic, if it happens for a human that his ascendant is either Capricorn, Aquarius, Virgo, or Leo, and one of the two malefics is in the ascendant or the 10th house, or they are both gathered free from the malefics, and the sun is in the 10th house, then this human is fit for the work of magic, delusion, and reflection. The strongest condition is that the ascendant be Virgo or Aquarius, and that within them, or within one of them, if it is the ascendant, the two malefics are present together, with Mercury alongside them or in opposition to them whilst being Eastern. This is the ultimate limit. For if the ascendant agrees with this description in a perfect manner, it also occurs that if the moon is connected to one of the two malefics, especially Mars, then no deed will be invalidated for him, and no trace will be delayed. If the lord of this ascendant joins the configuration, it becomes grand and momentous. And know that this ascendant, if it is the ascendant of the nativity birth chart, then you have attained something of the aim. If this ascendant corresponds to the time of undertaking the work for this knowledge, a specific kind of succor is achieved, attaining the first degree. The second pertains to momentous affairs, and they comprise various kinds. The first of these is the renunciation of the pleasures of this world, and the cessation of turning towards them or seeking them. For if the instrument is void of the heart's anxieties and the preoccupation with joy found therein, and they purify their hearts at that time and empty their secret thoughts of all else save this knowledge, they will reach their intended goal. Therefore, it is incumbent upon him to purify the heart from the superfluity of thoughts, just as it is incumbent to purify the body from the superfluity of corrupt wastes. For whoever is overcome by one of the four humours, his imaginings and thoughts will be suited to that mixing. The third involves the observance of the state of nourishment regarding both quality and quantity. As for the reduction in quantity, it is because the management of food constitutes a great occupation for the soul, diverting it from actions other than mere preservation. Indeed, a human being is not capable of strength in motion after an abundance of food, let alone engaging in thought and remembrance. Since the soul cannot combine the governance of digestion, sensation, and motion with the intensity of the soul's turn towards the realm of the unseen, along with what I have mentioned of these difficulties, they have stated that it is necessary to make the food, at the beginning of their fast, follow the custom of gradually reducing it each night by a specific weight and arrangement until they reach, in the final stage, the amount sufficient only to sustain the last breath of life. As for the quality, they have stated that it is necessary to abstain in one's nourishment from anything that has been separated from a living spirit meat, and that the food must consist of grains prepared with the oil of grains, such as sesame oil and the like. If they were to mix these grains with legumes, as is the custom of people in cooking them with these grains, there is no harm in that. For I have read that Al-Ruhawi and others found their spirits healthy upon such a diet. However, one must be cautious of everything that generates wind and disturbs the humours, especially the beans and sour foods, for they possess a specific property leading to the corruption of the brain. For this reason, the Sabians forbade all of them in their religion. From the causes that hinder success is the abundance of eating. For he who eats much drinks much inevitably, so vapours rise to the brain, corrupting his thought and confusing his brain. In sum, everything that harms the brain must be avoided, and everything that harms the heart must be shunned. At this point, it becomes evident that the master of this craft is in need of the science of medicine. He must employ that which strengthens the brain and the heart, and purifies them from impurities and turbidities. For the primary instruments of the master of this science are the heart and the brain. Should either of them falter, the soul becomes occupied with it, and thus fails to engage in the connection with the spiritual side. There is no doubt that reducing nourishment leads to what contradicts the temperament, causing weakness. Thus one must remedy that decline through one of three matters. The first is strengthening the brain with pleasant scents, for which there is no need for the soul to be occupied with digestion. Rather, it is a nourishment attained without toil or distraction. The second is strengthening the soul through simple sights, the lights that are not followed by a desire for anything else. This comprises a restriction to the primary constraint, which is simplicity. For indeed, if the walls of the house were engraved with carvings and restricted by many colours, the soul would become occupied with contemplating them and organising them from the intended purpose. For this reason, the one suffering from delirium is prevented from being placed in a painted house, owing to the restriction that it be engraved. This is because light is beloved to nature, and darkness is repugnant to it. And that is why its possessor is never in a state of panic in the open space. Thus, when the soul perceives light, it rejoices and is strengthened. And if it needs the restriction, the third constraint is that the colours be upon two divisions, one radiant like clear white, and the yellow and the red, and the other dark like the blackness of dust, and the indigo and the dark-coloured. And looking at the radiant colours brings about joy to the heart, and the opposite is true for the opposite. Thus, the closest of colours to simple light is whiteness. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "The best of your garments is white." The fourth restriction is that he should not allow his vision to follow that which causes longing for something else. For were it to be so, the soul would become occupied thereby. For the follower of the human form moves the lust, and looking at gold and silver and ornaments moves the greed. So, whenever the restrictions are achieved, the benefit is achieved for the seeker in emptying the innermost self from these corruptions. The third is the strengthening of the soul through hearing. This is because sound in itself cannot be described as pleasant or unpleasant. For any sound, were it to be extended as it is without renewal, would not be pleasant. Rather, pleasure occurs only upon the transition from sharp to heavy, or the reverse. Thus, pleasantness exists in truth as a quality for the soul upon comparing sounds to one another. And this pleasantness is what results from the harmonious composition. We have explained that human souls are naturally disposed to the love of harmonious proportions. Thus, upon hearing appropriate sounds, a movement occurs for the two commanders, heart and brain, and a reaching towards the beloved increases. There is no harm if the sama, spiritual listening, takes the place of intelligence for the heart and the brain. Then know that these matters are beneficial only by way of relaxation. Were they to be few, they would be like the station of salt in food. But as for when they become excessive, the soul becomes occupied with enjoying them, and they become a veil from the intended goal. This is the discourse regarding the quality of stripping the soul from familiar habits. Let that be upon the path of gradual progression, not abruptly, lest the soul becomes restive. The fifth of the tasks of the master of this work is that he must be far removed from external preoccupations. We have mentioned this once, yet we repeat it here to mention benefits additional to what we have mentioned. The first aspect: the soul has become accustomed to sensory objects for a very long time. The rational faculty is, at the beginning, indeed dormant, for the soul is occupied with the sensory, turning towards its side, and its frequent practice is the cause for the occurrence of aptitudes. Thus, inevitably, every soul acquires a habit of occupation with sensory objects, due to the frequency of engaging with them and inclining towards their side. Since occupation with thought is not compatible with occupation with sensory objects, meaning that man, with the presence of sensory objects and the delight in them, acts in a way that his thought is neglected. If the matter is such, it is necessary for him who desires to establish a relationship between his soul and the celestial spirits to strip his soul from them, and to turn with his thought toward the higher matters. The second reason: a faculty, if employed entirely in one direction, is undoubtedly stronger than if it were distributed over many matters. For there is no state like another state, and no part is like a part of the parts of the power. If thou hast known this, we say, God, the Most High, created the rational soul such that it is never inactive from action. As for the theoretical faculty, it is never devoid of thinking about a thing or imagining a thing, either by composition or by imagination, to the extent that it is said that it does not sleep. And as for the practical faculty, it is not possible for man to remain for a period of time without performing an action, not even for the blink of an eye and its movement, until the form is impressed upon the receptive matter. For the soul acts through the body, and if it remains suspended from action, the human being acts by nature. And if this is so, then the soul attaches itself to the singular direction, and the action serves the singular perspective. The sixth, matter. This operation involves the connection of celestial spirits with terrestrial bodies. This is the intended meaning, and praise be to God that he is indeed independent of such endeavours. Ibn Washiyah said, "The intent of these 40 chapters involves man praising the idol of the sun, Mercury and Saturn, and connecting with them through that which befits them of fumigation and humble entreaty, seeking their aid in attaining the objective." I say, this craft is not accomplished by mere thought and imagination, without a soul for that star to aid it, such that it becomes a settled faculty. Then we have clarified that souls were created obedient to illusions and imaginations. Indeed, most matters of the senses follow the dictates of the imagination. Thus, there must be a correspondence from the celestial spirits to those distinct celestial bodies to place them therein. So, if the intent creates an image, the sensory perception attaches to it, then the imagination and the illusion act upon it. Thus, the powers turn toward it intensely. And if the powers correspond, they are stronger in action than mere imagination. For this secret, the ancient Chaldeans took idols as representations of the stars to bring down spiritual meanings into the sought-after distinct forms, such as forms of love, health, misfortune, and happiness. They approached their worship and occupied their gazes by looking at those statues, and their tongues by reading the invocations upon them, describing their attributes or their effects until their forms reached the soul on 2 levels. That the human cannot describe the thing with his tongue unless the meaning has occurred in his mind, and upon describing it with his tongue, that sound reaches the hearing. So the meaning is understood in the soul again. Thus, the mentioned thing becomes preserved in the human remembrance through a prior visualization and a subsequent one. So there occurs a correspondence of the senses in turning toward the spirituality of those stars through the suspension of the soul's powers upon them. Thus, the soul becomes persistent in these actions, close to the sought-after soul, based on these specific purposes. It is related from Tumtum the Indian that he expressed these meanings in subtle phrases, saying, "The thinker does not marry the thought of, nor does the thinker satiate his gaze on what he thinks of. For the thinker does not touch what he thinks of, nor does the thought enter the genus of what is thought. For the fire is fiery, and the water is watery, yet the thought is airy. Thus the airy is distinct from the earthen, so the thought of the thinker does not grasp from the air, save what he looks into. The thinker does not move a limb of his members, except to seek the grasp of his thought. The thinker does not descend from the rank of his elevation to the thought, except to seek to take from the thought. The thinker does not look to the light of thought with his eyes, yet the thinker does not cease looking at the meaning of his thought, not to the centre of the thought. The thinker does not mean a thing from the affairs of his soul, as his thought means. The thinker does not eat anything of the living creatures, O thinker, nor of the plants, but rather his food is his thought. And he commanded him to enslave the worshippers, and that the rain, the lightning, the thunder, and the earthquakes descend for him, and that the pillars of the earth shake for him, comprising the spirits and the bodies. While he desires to descend therein, he departs when he conceptualizes the noble forms, cleaving the rocks, sweetening the spirits, causing the astonishing matter to appear, and reaching the ends which are sought. And whoever ascends to the centre of thought does not cease to ascend until he descends to the status of, I say, this is a precious chapter. I have not found the like of it in books for encouraging the attainment of the realization of the truth, explaining that whoever practices this craft must not leave anything of his body, his thought, his imagination, and his ambition, and his intellect, and his soul, except that he suspends them upon the spirituality of the star which he desires, seeking aid through the veracity of his knowledge, or upon what holds an attachment to that star. And whenever the attachment is more intense, the attainment of the objective is more complete. And know that the wondrous matter regarding the influence of these actions is the suspension of all the perceptive powers upon the celestial spirit, so that it becomes for the seeker like the illusion for the one who desires the realization of a trace. For example, when he wishes to create a human, or intends to assume a likeness, he must possess a perfect visualization and a suspension of his ambition upon the organ which he desires to act upon that which he desires. Thus, if he intends the realization of the action, it comes to exist in actuality, like the fire. And if he intends the numbing of the limbs of a person, he envisions the quality of coldness and dryness within them. However, the immersion into the depths of our era regarding medicines and treatments for coldness, dryness, and heat is very common, or casting him into positions of discord. And as for where these matters originate, know that the stars do not act upon that action unless the receptive materials for the specific effects are gathered. Then your heart is tied, and your illusion is directed away from that star to achieve that person inevitably. The ultimate reality. It has been established that from here is a principle. The world of emanation pours forth all forms. Thus, it does not specify one faculty with the acceptance of a form to the exclusion of another. Because the giver is not stingy, but rather the elemental bodies in their entirety are receptive to all contrarian forms in succession. However, the emanation of some of those forms, upon that principle, the world of nature, is more worthy than others. And when the psychic connection of the master of the talisman with the celestial spirits is strengthened, the emanation is outweighed towards the particular nature. The fifth chapter, regarding the discipline of actions which the master of the craft practices. And these are matters, one of which is that the people described our actions as necessary by looking at specific forms. He said, if they converse, they witness. And this has changed, so he finds it distant. And this indicates its aspects, one of which is that if we look at a living creature, the looking at it changes the physical and psychological states based on what was said in the first aspect. And the second of them is that seeing that form of life is nothing but looking at the human in vague terms regarding the state. And the third, looking at the thing may be a cause for desire in the looked upon at one time, and repulsion another time, and the body changes due to that looking, turning from heat to cold, and vice versa. And the fourth, that we witness strange states in animals upon their looking at different things, as we witness the repulsion of horses and mules upon seeing elephants and camels, such that some of them die, and perhaps the soul kills itself from the intensity of the fear of what it sees. And the lion flees when he hears the beating of great drums, or when he sees the gleam of brass bowls and clatters. And if he sees a white rooster, he separates. And if he sees the fire at night, or if he sees a rope of a black camel. Thus, these are bodies indicating that looking at different forms inherits different effects. Then the master of the talisman builds upon this rule, mentioning varied forms and a type for every single one of them, highly effective deeds. As for these forms, how were they known, and how were their effects known? There is no way to this except by inspiration to the generality, or that the Chaldeans extracted that, and they say that the spirits of these stars revealed themselves to specific people and inspired them with these things. The second type. From the introductions of this science, the people of the talisman agreed that every form in this lower world has a likeness in the celestial sphere, and they claimed that the lower forms are obedient to the upper forms, like the snakes for the dragon, and the scorpions for Scorpio, and the predatory beasts for Leo, and others. And this introduction. Proofs have been established to clarify the essence of this subtle point. So he says, indeed, these forms which the imaginer imagines, there is a dispute amongst people regarding them, concerning 4 schools of thought. It is said, they are non-existent, pure void, and the first opinion is invalid, because we imagine things and distinguish between their lengths and widths and their colours, and pure non-existence has no such attributes. Therefore it is established that they are existent within us or in the external reality. And the first is invalid, for they are either existing in themselves, which is a substance, or existing in a physical power in the heart or in the brain. And the first is invalid because the abstract substance is not divisible in any state, nor is it distinguished by a side from a side. Thus, the imagined form is not like that. And the second is also invalid, because the totality of our bodies relative to this imagined form is small relative to the large, and the large cannot dwell in the small vessel. Thus it is established that this existing form is in the external reality. It remains that it exists in the lower world. So it is false, for whoever is in a specific place is absent from another place in the higher world. The third important matter. The practitioners of this art agreed upon distributing everything in the lower world upon these 7 wandering stars. So they mentioned that the sun is of such and such days, and such colours, and such foods, and likewise the positions and the jewels and the incenses and the morals and the shapes. Thus, if we intended our action, we must seek the aid of the star responsible for that action. Then combine everything related to that star, from foods, clothes, shapes, and fumigation around it. So, if these qualities are gathered, the power of that star is strengthened towards it, and it becomes very strong to carry out the intended. The fourth important matter, that the unified form occurs in faces. From it is engraving on paper, parchment, and skin, and on the whole, upon anything that relates to the star whose aid is sought in that action. And from it is pouring metal and carving from the substance that relates to that star. The fifth important matter, reading the incantation, which may be known or unknown shapes. And they may be unknown, and the benefit in them is from faces, one of which is that that action works for those specific numerical proportions with some of the upper spirits regarding the relationship to the lower. And that is not unlikely, for experience has indicated that if the 3 by 3 square, magic square, is written for the one experiencing difficulty in urination, he urinates with ease. And we do not know if those people placed them as subjects for those numbers or if they utilized this benefit. And even if those numbers were written with other digits placed for them, they would not yield this benefit. So we knew that the placement of the natural shapes for these numbers acts upon the specific letter of the correlation. Thus, our mention here involves the paper containing the names of God the Exalted and the names of the angels, or containing a great clarification regarding the urgency of the spirits to obedience. And the second of them, if the soul hears those incantations and does not understand anything from them and does not stand upon their meanings, a form of bewilderment and astonishment overtakes it. And due to that bewilderment, the connection to the sensory world is severed, so it connects completely to the world of the unseen. The sixth important matter, fumigation. It falls upon existence, so they take the idols of the stars and fumigate at them with fumigation, and at times they take likenesses in the form of specific persons, and fumigate those forms with things suitable to the purpose sought. And at times they fumigate with the frankincense of the talisman at the outcome of a knot, or similar things desired for fumigation with the specific incense. The seventh important matter, the tying of the knot and the reading of the incantation upon the knot. And the action of the soul regarding the blowing on the knot is well known in the divine laws. Thus, if the spirit of the stars aids that action, and the soul connects with the celestial spirit, and the incantations are read upon it, and the high and low correspond, and the form suitable to that star is formed, the star becomes designated to that person in the manner of the lover and the beloved, or the distinct form. Thus it occurs that the celestial spirit becomes angered at the anger of that person who performs the action, for a specific cause suitable for that action, upon the specific organ. So, by the preservation of the form, the desired effect is preserved. If you desire its dissolution, you do so by what corresponds to that untying, or by changing the state to the opposite state, which is suitable for that dissolution. And this must have the utmost unveiling and clarification in this chapter. The sixth chapter, and the proof of the weakness of what we have recounted regarding the philosophers and the Sabians, and the evidence against the soundness of the religion of Islam. Know that the basis of their speech is built upon the eternity of the world and the existence of a first cause for it. And the saying of that is false, and this indicates the existence of the first. That all existing things are nothing but the one, the truth, the contingent. And every contingent must have a cause that brings it into being, and it is impossible that all existents are contingent. There must be distinct natures comprising two meanings. One of them is that it is a necessary existent, and the second is that it is conceivable that two necessary existents exist. And this indicates that it is necessary, from the termination of the chain of possibilities, to reach an existent, a necessary existent. And the second, is it possible that the necessary existent be one or more than one? And the proof is that we establish, if we suppose the necessary of existence to be two, it would be refrained that there be a number after that. The second, that the determination of the thing restricts it with an addition. Thus, the concept of A does not prevent the conception of partnership, and the concept of these thousands prevents the conception of partnership, and the concept of this thousand prevents the conception of that, and this thousand comprises the thousands. So if we made this thousand comprise an additional restriction regarding this thousand, is this existent or existing? This is a form of the multiplicity of the existent, and it is refrained that it be non-existent. And what upon us is whether you assume the premise of the third, that wherein the two things share is distinct from that wherein each one of them is distinguished from the other. This is a clear premise. When you have established this, I say, if we assume two existents, each one of them being a necessary existent for its own essence, then they share in the necessity of existence, and they differ in the individuation. Thus, that wherein they share is distinct from that wherein they differ in existence and contrast in meaning. Thus, each one of them is composed of two parts, and it is necessary that what is composed of two parts, if both are necessary, then the compound is necessary, and if they were not, or if one of them was, then each one of them is contingent, and the compound is in need of the part. And whatever is in need of the contingent, or was the first of the possibilities, then that compound is contingent. And we had assumed it to be necessary, and this is a contradiction. Thus it is established by the sum of what we have mentioned that all existing things are but the one, the first. And as for when we said that every contingent is created, it is because every contingent is in need of the influencer. So the need of the influence is either to be in the state of its remaining, or the need of the existent is to the one who makes it exist, the state of its existence.